you are not making good use of your willpower. And relying on willpower and motivation for everything is unscalable. I tried it for a good part of my life. It doesn't work. Okay, we're going to rethink systems as a tool to leverage will. They are more powerful, easier, and more flexible than most people realize. And then finally, compounding systems are the strongest virtuous cycle for self-improvement. As you leverage your will using systems, you'll become better at creating systems, which creates a flywheel. Basically, you'll start spending less and less time thinking and more time taking action. This is the way that we're going to reframe recognizing that it is actually a problem to over-rely on willpower, which is not something that anyone really talks about. It's really seen as like a virtue to have high willpower in Western society, which is, willpower is good, it serves a purpose, but I feel like most people don't really understand that the purpose is quite specific. Spoilers. Willpower is good to initiate tasks. So if you have something that's your high resistance to, and you are, struggling to get into it, you have a burst of willpower to get started, and then quickly motivation takes over. So if you're finding that you're using willpower all the time for everything, which I've experienced, and I didn't realize was super wrong, I'm going to explain to you in this video. Yep, it's super wrong. It's completely unsustainable, causes burnout, causes you to hate what you're doing, and then the core idea I have is systems are the way to fix that. This is an intro. I don't know if I'll read through the whole thing, but basically my life was really bad because of this. I was in school, had this problem, started during high school, got even worse during uni. And this is something which I want to explain to you, potentially if you're a viewer who's you're in school as well, maybe you've had some of these similar problems. What I do want to tell you is that it gets worse over time, the longer you keep doing it. And particularly if you take it out of school and then you start trying to go about your everyday life and career with this strategy, it's a bit of a train wreck. So you really have to change this as soon as possible. Okay. The way that I've written here is that over-relying on willpower is not really like something that you need to have high skill for. It is just the wrong way to do things. It is actually just completely wrong. I compare it to building a house with no tools. If we think of systems as a tool, then the question is like, why are you not using a tool? Like, you have to use tools. Like, there's no reason to not use a tool. It makes things harder, and there's zero reason. So just use every tool. And this is just a tool that it's increasingly necessary in the modern world. So maybe our culture has a bit of time to catch up, but they're not teaching this. So yeah, in the video is I'm going to explain the exact systems that I used to go from like completely failing everything to managing my life pretty well. I've titled it How to Use Systems to Build a Life That Runs on Autopilot. I'm using the word autopilot a little bit cheekily here. The idea is that in your life, your difficulty is not going to be on taking action. Your difficulty is in making decisions and thinking. That's the bottleneck. So decision making can be done on autopilot. If you can do that, then taking action in life becomes really easy. When things are hard, it's not hard because it takes effort. It's hard because you have to use lots of willpower, or you have to use lots of executive ability, to make things happen. Just like doing something, is not hard. Compare it to going for a run, for example. Moving your muscles is not hard. Everyone can do that. It's like the hard bit is having to use your brain to keep telling yourself, okay, handle the pain and keep going. So that's the part that we want to put on the autopilot. So this is the structure of the video. I've written quite a bit, so I'm sorry if it's a long video, but this is a very important topic. So the first bit is asking that question, am I making my life harder than it needs to be? I want to really go into the symptoms. So like if you are the kind of person who is struggling with the same things, I want to make sure you actually like understand why it's causing problems. And I will talk a bit about why it really, really fails in the long term. I'm going to frame it as something called unleveraged willpower. It's a word I came up with myself, but I'll get into that. Then the next bit is I want to really get across that systems are like just so wonderful. I think that's a bit of a negative impression that we have of them, because it seems like they're systems of control, you know, that kind of thing. It takes away from the spontaneity of life. And in my experience, I've had the complete opposite outcome. Like, I just feel so much more freed in life. All of the boring, annoying parts of life are just like automated away, and I get to focus on interesting things. And the big difference is going to be systems created by others enforce their will over you, but systems created by you enact your will over your life, which is really the key takeaway that you get from systems, is that you actually get to enact your will. You get to come up with ideas of like how I want to change things in my life, what I want to actually achieve, and then you can make it happen. Then thirdly, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, blueprint, how do you create a system, and in particular my table of recommended systems, because I think that a lot of the most basic things that people need to systematize their life are like pretty much the same for everyone. And there's a lot of resources out there for like the most basic ones. So I think it would be really useful for you to like know what needs to be systematized. You know, that goes for like, you know, everyone should have a calendar in the modern age. That's one thing which is like super obvious. If you don't use a calendar, I mean, you already know that. You already know that's a bad one. I'm sure you've had problems with that. And then fourthly, this is just a final extension. What if you turned everything in life into a system? I'm a little bit obsessed with systems, I will admit that. I would argue that everyone should be doing the exact same thing that I am doing, which is systematizing everything. But I know everyone. Look, that's a separate issue. You can see if you're convinced by the end of this video. And also I'll just explain more about how my own journey happened. Okay, let's get into it. Number one, am I making my life harder than it needs to be? I've written up a diagnosis. This is like framed as like a psychological diagnosis. This is not actually scientific. This is my own, okay? So there's a few different categories, and just think about which one, if any of them apply to you. This is number one, the willpower and motivation test. Just have a read through of yourself. This is basically asking the question, is my life like difficult? Are the tasks I'm doing every day more difficult than they need to be, right? Do I have this insanely high internal resistance to them? So yeah, massive peaks. You need to motivate yourself, and negotiating yourself. That's always a sign of a problem. Number two, the decision fatigue test. This is basically saying, am I getting exhausted mentally throughout my day when I shouldn't be? This is a really bad sign. I think it's seen as like normal to be tired mentally, but there is a difference between just like having done a lot of effort and being tired versus decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is something very specific towards decisions. When you have like that burnout of decision fatigue, you suddenly can't do anything. You can't decide anything of like what to do next. Even becomes an incredibly hard choice. The third factor is going to be consistency and quality. This is just the question of like, are you actually reliable in life? For me, this was a little bit of a personal issue where I was the most unreliable person ever. I really wasn't happy with it. Where people could just ask you things like, can you do this? And your response is like, I hope so, maybe. I didn't feel like I was like in control of whether or not it would happen. And also the last one there, do you have moments of high resolve that never go anywhere? That's a bit of a personal one for me. I would always have these moments of like, oh, I've got to fix my life, I've got to make this change and make sure it never happens again. And then what comes of it? You know, it's sad. You really hope that it's like a turning point, but it never is. And then the mental load test. This is just like, have you given your brain too many tasks? Like, do I expect my brain to remember everything? Do I expect my brain to just like keep track of schedules? This is an important one here that I had never thought of before. But like relying on memory for reminders of future consequences creates constant low-grade anxiety. You're basically asking your brain to be like, give me a reminder in 7 days of this thing that's due. The brain doesn't work like that. It's either constantly remembering or completely forgetting. So what's going to happen is, if you've got these deadlines on your mind, they're just going to be there constantly every single moment of every day. And they stack up however many things you ask yourself to remember. Struggling to disconnect will be a common symptom of that. And then putting out fires. So the explanation that I have for this is basically what you are doing is cognitive overload and over-reliance on willpower. So this is, the first thing I'll say is this is something that does not get better over time. You cannot like practice this skill and become better at managing cognitive overload. This is like, you've hit your cap. You're asking your brain to do too much. And if we tell ourselves things like, oh, I should be able to do this, I should be able to do it. The interesting thing is that while it may look like other people are managing things just fine, the usual explanation that I'll give is that people are actually doing things differently to you are. They are not actually asking themselves, asking their brain to do as much work as you are. So these are the explanations that I have written up. If you look at the categories, you see which one kind of relates the most for you. First one is just things are too hard. If this is the only category that resonated with you, then there may be a different problem for you than over-reliance on willpower. But if you're in bottom to the next ones, decision fatigue, just doing too much, not enough rest. That's really just that simple. Most people don't get decision fatigue because their lives are so habitual. There's been a lot of studies on habits of like what percentage of people's decisions every day are habit, and it's like really high. Don't remember the exact number, but for you, it may be lower. Maybe you would just not rely on habits as much as you should. If you think of like small everyday tasks like chores, your morning routines, how much of that is actually habitual for you? Or are you actually like thinking about it every single time you do it consciously? And then consistency. When you don't have systems, you're basically asking yourself to be a perfectionist because things fall apart as soon as you stop being perfect, which is just not possible, and this is a recipe for disaster. And then mental load. I've got a mention here of the Zeigarnik effect. That's the effect of when you have an issue on your mind, it's like an open loop, and it kind of stays there until it's resolved. As soon as you fix the problem, it disappears, and you never think about it again. It completely like just fades away. And so the Zeigarnik effect looks at what happens when you interrupt a task halfway through and how that completely changes how you remember it. If you leave something unfinished, it becomes easier to remember and harder to ignore. You can take advantage of that. So for example, if you do a task halfway through and it's like a big project, you're working on it, it's kind of going along, but you've got some decisions to make. If you stop it halfway and just like go for a walk, it'll just like be there on your mind. And you might have like a eureka moment during the walk, so you can like use it that way. But if you're just like doing this constantly interrupting yourself, constantly like having too many things loaded in your brain, it just stacks up and up and up. And each one of those does have a actual mental cost. So that is a pretty surefire way to go into cognitive overload. Constant background stress. And here's a common outcome is excessive ruminating. People like act like worrying about things is productive for some reason. The science basically says that worrying has no benefit whatsoever and just makes you stressed for no reason. So like repetitive thinking about unsolved problems is just like the most unproductive thing and just actively makes your brain worse at doing everything. Super links with burnout. So those are the symptoms and just a quick explanation of how they work. So the common trend amongst them, as you may have noticed, is over-relying on your brain to do things that it shouldn't have to do. You can make things easier. These are the key takeaway that really changed things for me is you can just make things easier for yourself. There's so many ways, rather than just asking yourself constantly, just remember every deadline, just make every decision constantly. It doesn't work. And also I would like to really make this point because I'm reaching the point of life where you're no longer in school, moving from bounded to unbounded problems. This is a very subtle one that really got me, is that when you're in school, they ask you a project, it's like, hey, here's the brief. They tell you exactly what you need to do, and it's just completely written out. There's no questions involved. It's just like you just have to do it. And then in life, suddenly, you just have to do good things. If you want to lose weight, become healthy, go to the gym, get muscles, no one gives you a guide. You just have to do a whole bunch of things that will add up to success. So it's a sprinting versus marathon problem. You can't do these sprints. You can't rely on motivation or willpower because it's just the small things adding up. It is like guaranteed to fail. And as an adult, you have to balance other areas of life. This is the kind of thing which, if you are over relying on willpower throughout probably school and then probably work afterwards, you are probably neglecting your health. That's just a common thing, because you don't have any spare brain power to set up a fitness routine. The overarching point is willpower alone does not work for long-term goals because it's just small things adding up. It's all that consistency. Now, the way that I think about this, since I've had more experience with systems, is I've come to think of it as unleveraged will. And I'm going to explain this through a framework, courtesy of Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, an absolutely goated book. It's about kind of like behavioral psychology. And the framework goes like this, right? So most of the time we are in autopilot. That's going to be our system one thinking. And when we realize there's a problem, something comes to our attention, we switch into system two. That's going to be our logical, rational mind. Hopefully, most of the time we're in autopilot, and whenever we do go into logical mode, we have a goal. We're like, okay, here's a problem, we need to fix this so that I can get back into the flow state, right? I would explain that with an example of it's like driving on a highway, and most of the time you're in flow state, and then all of a sudden you realize you're in the wrong lane. You kind of have this moment of snapping to attention, right? Suddenly you're mentally present. Suddenly you're just thinking about the problem. Okay, where do I need to go? How do I get there? And then the result of that is you come to the conclusion, I need to switch lanes. And so you do that, and then you check that everything's fine, and then switch back to autopilot. That's the idea. So the goal is to find the easiest way to basically resolve the problem. Specifically, we don't need to solve the problem straight away. We just need to kind of get ourselves back on the right track so that I can get back into autopilot. I can trust my old habits, and I just don't have to think anymore. Is really the goal. So sometimes, most of the time it'd be nice if we could do things like the, changing lanes example, where it was just one action. I just need to take one action and I can get back into flow state. That would be an example of a leveraged will. So you have decided, I need to get where I'm going, and then you just have one action, and then you can just move on, forget about it, and go back to autopilot, and eventually the desired outcome happens. Only one action required. And now an example of an unleveraged will is when we have a decision we want to make happen, and we switch into this system two, and there's decision after decision. We have to constantly stay in this state. We can't switch back yet because the problem isn't resolved yet. We don't trust that things are sorted out. There's ongoing maintenance basically that you need to do. So you're staying in system two the whole time, and hopefully you get the desired outcome anyway. But the problem is that you just are staying in there. And this system two has higher cognitive resources that it's consuming basically. So that's going to be contributing to your cognitive overload. So the problem is not that we're using our willpower. The problem is that I can't just do one thing and sort the problem out. I can't trust myself to switch back into system one. If I switch back into system one, then I have no faith whatsoever that things are going to work out well. So I have to stay in this mode. So there's nothing I can do to like resolve the problem. And I'll say it works well when that level of effort is necessary, which sometimes it is. But if that's a recurring thing, if that's for every little task in life, even the small ones, that is going to mean we're constantly in that high effort state, constantly consuming more energy and time than we can afford. And I've got here, imagine what the task is for you. I want you to like hold in your mind, what is the task recently that has been consuming all your resources? Is it like, the projects at school, or is it like routines at home? What is it that's consuming your mental resources? And why are you staying in that system 2 state? Why are you not able to do one thing that resolves the problem? Right? So we're going to look into that. If the crux is, what is that one simple action that lets you get back into autopilot? What actually allows us to be able to do such a thing? The important note is it doesn't have to be immediate. Like switching lanes, I think is a good example, because when you switch lanes, you don't get where you're going. You just put yourself on the right track, so that now you're like, oh yeah, well if I'm in the right lane, and then I'm going to keep driving forward, and autopilot, eventually I'll get there. So I don't need to have to make more decisions. So I'm okay in autopilot. I have trust, right? So what you're doing is you're looking for the move that allows your brain to stop manually processing and start automatic cruising again. That's going to be the move that leverages your will. And the way that we're going to think about this is that when we want to improve areas of our life, we're going to ask ourselves this question: can I make one decision and then trust that it will happen without micromanaging? And for me, and I think it's probably the default for most people, this answer is like a super big no across all areas of life. There's so much micromanaging that we need to do. The big crux is basically going to be systems. Systems are what allow you to have that trust. Without systems, there's no real reason why you would trust. Like if you're doing an essay, right? If you're writing through a big project, it's going to take you hours and hours. How are you going to trust that everything's going to happen? If you have deadlines coming up and then it all needs to be managed, how are you going to trust that it's going to happen if you don't put all the effort in? Outcome of that is you'll be forced to stay in willpower mode the whole time. This is the way that we're going to think about systems. So that's a tool that we're going to leverage those decisions, so that when we're in the system 2 state, there's something that we can do to switch lanes and put ourselves on the right track. So what is a system? Well, how do I apply a system to my life? The first thing that we're going to talk about is that it's not like the systems that we've been experiencing in school or in work, rigid and boring, systems of control. That is not what we're talking about, right? Most of us don't like that. Here's my definition. A system is a decision that you make once so that you don't have to make it 1,000 times. That's it. They can be big and small, but that's basically the crux. If you know something should go more or less the same way every time, just make it happen every time. Don't choose it every single time. This is basically what a habit is, right? Habits are subconsciously programmed into the brain like a system. But there's many other kinds of systems that can be, external. Because, as we said before, relying on the brain is not going to solve everything. We can't get a habit for everything. Can be flexible or rigid, can be big or small. Yes, I'll be starting for small ones first. Some of my systems are pretty big, but we'll get to that later. And that's just the whole purpose. Stay in autopilot longer. This is the main goal. Can you make a change in your life by changing the system and having it getting carried out automatically? Okay, some examples. You can probably find a few if you look at your own life, and particularly the places where you've actually succeeded in life. Usually success comes from consistency. Usually consistency comes from systems. So you probably have some systems in life. Small ones, like placing your wallet or keys in the same spot every evening, so that you always know where to find it, so you never lose them. It's just a simple system, and it works. Keeping a book behind next to your bed, just so that it's there and it reminds you to read instead of scrolling your phone. Simple. Kind of nudges you in the right direction, you know. Preparing gym clothes the night before. And you can have some medium ones, bigger ones, you know. You keeping all your appointments in calendar and checking every day. That's a wonderful system. And, you know, you can see how that kind of gives you a bit more trust. You know, if I know I'm going to check my calendar every day and I know that all the important things are in the calendar, I don't actually have to remember very many things myself when it comes to deadlines. Meal prepping, making checklists to track your daily tasks, that's a goated one. That's, if you haven't tried that before, that's going to be one of my number one recommendations. And large, I don't even want to overwhelm me with them, but I'm a little bit addicted to systems. I'm a bit obsessed, so I built some big ones. But that's going to be for later. You do not have to get into that. What's the pattern? Whenever you find a small way that you want to improve your life, instead of like making promises to yourself, you just change your environment or your habits, and then it'll nudge you in the right direction automatically from then on, right? And I do want to stress, this is not like a one master system that solves everything in your life. It's basically a whole bunch of like small ones. It really feels just like 100 just nudges in the right direction. And then hopefully 0 in the opposite direction is you figure out how to remove the negative nudges. So every day through life, you're kind of like on autopilot, just getting nudged in the right direction automatically. So you're not forced to do anything. It's not rigid, but it's just, you know, it's just like you just go with the flow, and then it turns out that going with the flow put you in exactly where you should be. Takes off a lot of mental burden. Yeah, and if you have those moments of high resolve now, there's something you can do about them. Instead of like, oh, I get to make a promise to myself, I need to do better, I'll make a commitment. You're like, okay, I have a moment of high resolve, I know exactly what to do, edit my system. And then you can enact your will across your entire future with one action. Yeah, and I did write a few things here about that being the reason why we don't like external systems, because the purpose of the system being to leverage its creator's will. If the system is designed by someone else, it's just them exerting their will over you. When you start creating your own systems, you will stop being at the mercy of the outside. You'll start to automate all the boring stuff. I have not had to remember like small tasks and appointments and deadlines in so long. And I'm like, I can't even, I don't even remember what it was like back then. Making 1,000 decisions a day, I just can't do that anymore. And so when all the boring stuff is handled, you actually have like time and energy and brain power to like come up with big goals and actually make them happen. It's honestly crazy remembering what it was like back then for me. It was definitely 1,000 decisions a day kind of thing. So this is gonna be my basic guide of how to create a system. What works, you know, in my experience, what makes a good system, what makes a bad system. And I'm gonna tell you exactly what I recommend. Firstly, the 5 rules. These are just stuff I came up with myself. Don't come from anywhere else, but I'm very confident in them because I have a lot of experience with them. Rule number 1, do not break this one. If you have to remember something, do not use your brain. I cannot stress this enough. The brain is so bad at remembering. And like, I have a worse memory than average, for sure. But I don't even think anyone can remember the kind of things you need to remember in modern life. That's a quote from the GOAT. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. This is like so true. And the more you try and remember things, you're just like losing spare brain power for actually having ideas. You'll notice that, right? Your creativity goes down as you get more stressed. This is one which I have included. If you ask me what I'm doing tomorrow, you might be surprised, I don't know. I could not tell you what I'm doing tomorrow. I don't remember. It's just in my calendar, you know? Everything's written down there. And I have full trust that it's like a good schedule. I'm like my own personal assistant. You know, last night I sat down and created an absolutely goated plan for myself today. And I'm just like on autopilot. Rule number 2. If it can be automated, you must automate it. There's a lot that you can do nowadays with software. But even there's a lot of non-software ways to automate things. You just ask yourself that question, what if this happened on its own? The example that I give for me personally is like resisting temptations. Like I have super bad YouTube addiction. I get totally addicted to that stuff. And I don't want it to happen during the workday. So I automated it. I physically cannot access YouTube. I did like a child lock, you know, when parents lock their children's phones. I just did that to myself. And now it doesn't happen during the workday. I get to enjoy it outside because I've just automated it, you know. I made the decision once and then it just gets automatically carried out every other day. Number 3, if it needs to happen reliably, tie it to something that already happens reliably. This is just very sensible and saves a lot of time and effort. So you want to make a few like foundational daily and weekly routines. Oh, they're so good. I have a morning, evening, and weekly routines, and it's just so nice. Anytime I think to myself, oh, I should do this tomorrow morning before I leave, got to make sure I remember, I just put it on the list, and then I'm 100% guaranteed to look at it tomorrow. So I don't have to stress. Number 4, design your environments to align with what you plan to do. Environment design is so huge. I think this is something which was not on my radar for a long time. But you have so much control of your environment. You know, like your bedroom, your study, your desk, your storage. This really kind of makes habits easy, which habits are very, very huge. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, you probably should. And also, huge one, your digital environment. People don't think about this. Man. You really want things to be in line with how you actually intend to use them. There's so much I could say on that, but it'd be a lot. I'll save it for later. And rule number 5, I really want this one to be something you pay attention to. Plan with your bad days in mind, not just good days. It is so tempting. It is like, I was in this frame of mind constantly when I was getting to systems. You're like envisioning the perfect situation where you become the most perfect person and you have a system which just works perfectly every day, and it collapses on your very first bad day. Again, we're going to take the strategy of make things easier. There's just no reason to make things harder than they need to be. So it is possible to create systems that will work even on your bad days. And you'll start asking yourself the question of like, what do I actually need to be able to succeed on my bad days? It's actually possible. Can your sleep deprived, burnt out Tuesday afternoon me still execute this? It's not easy enough if not. You'll want to mitigate your bad days and make sure you can recover well on them. Never act like they're never going to happen. It's just obvious, right? Here's a bonus rule. You might not understand this at this point, but I kind of had to add it because it's very true. If a decision is correct in 80% of cases, it is very often more effective to just make it automatic and handle the exceptions manually. Essentially, I find that the value in keeping things flexible is a lot less than I expected when I first got into systems. And the value of making things automatic and habitual is just so high. So, if you follow those rules, your systems are probably good. And I think it's a good yardstick to hold up to for your, as you're tweaking them. But the next question is like, what kinds of systems are we making? The answer is you can solve basically anything in life with a system, but the ones that come up often are very common across all people. So I've made a list here. My recommended systems. Number 1, I've mentioned this many times, deadline juggling. It's awful. Do you have to remember everything regarding your deadlines? Now, for this table, I've given basically like the problem, then the willpower solution, which is what I used to do, and I think many people do, and then the system solution. So what is the willpower solution to deadline juggling? Basically, just worry about things constantly until they're done. The brain doesn't have like a reminder system, like, please remind me in 14 days about this urgent thing. No, you're going to be thinking about it constantly. Causes stress and probably low quality work. And in particular, it really doesn't work after school. I really have to drive that one home. System solution is just use a calendar. Like, if you're not using calendar in this year, it's so hard. It's so hard without a calendar. And also making timelines for long-term work. That's particularly important when you have like a big project. You know, it's like due in 30 days, but you're gonna have to work on it constantly for, you know, maybe 10 hours. Okay, you can't do it in one day, so, you know, you decide when you're gonna do each chunk, breaking things down. Very nice to do that. Next problem, analysis paralysis, breaking big projects into tiny tasks. Yeah, it's it tends to be very, very hard to do that mentally. Trying to simulate the entire project in your head it gets really hard with the bigger projects in school. Super, you know, tendency towards overwhelm and burnout because you're just consuming so many resources the whole time you're working on it. Solution, checklists. I love checklists. I cannot state enough how much I love checklists. Anytime I have a project, like any task during the day, and I'm like, oof, this takes more than one step, immediately I bust out a checklist. That is so easy, quick and easy. I have my favorite checklist app, and I think everyone needs them. Like, checklists are so powerful if you learn how to use them well. Next one is prioritization. Choosing when to work on one domain of life or another. The default for most people is probably going to be the mere urgency effect. That's just going to do whatever is making the most noise, whatever's screaming loudest at you in any given moment. It results in putting out constant fires, right? You're just responding to the emergencies. You're never actually being proactive and preventing anything. And in particular, you'll never, like guaranteed, you'll never be making progress on long-term goals. I'm sure you've noticed that. The system solution is task lists. Now I have a book here, you know, called GTD, Getting Things Done. This is the most goated book ever written. This guy's a legend. But the crux of that is just task lists. You just keep a list of every task that needs to be done. This allows you to basically be happy with the things you're not doing in any given moment. If you find that like it's hard to commit to one thing because you know there's other things on that are important and need to be done, you need to be able to trust that like, okay, it's written down, the task is actually defined somewhere, I will not forget it. I've also written out here, carving out time for long-term goals. So that's gonna be something like Deep Work, another book here I've got here. That's basically arguing for the value of working on the really slow projects. Because there's gonna be no urgency. You can't rely on the motivation that comes from the deadline. You actually have to schedule the time proactively. Next one, avoidance anxiety. For me, this is a huge one. Scary problems are scary. And starting the big project can be surprisingly scary. There's a few methods for this that are really like negative kind of like coping systems. Self-guilting is a big one because your problem is that you know you should do it, but the resistance is so high that you're like, you need to find like a massive amount of willpower within yourself. And so you'll do anything that kind of pressures you. So you will start actually adding pressure to yourself, which is a very, very dangerous slippery slope. Adding pressure to yourself intentionally. Self-guilting is a way of adding pressure. Waiting for the right mood to strike. Basically just waiting until the deadline pressure is enough to force you to move. Another one actually is intentionally overloading your plate with too many things so that the pressure just gets ramped up. So you have to act. You force yourself to act from all the pressure. What does that cause? Well, it's just like, depending on your coping mechanism, it's usually a problem, but adding pressure to your life is just a bad idea for actually enjoying life, obviously. System solution, I love this. This has been a new one for me actually. Accountability with a friend. It's just goated. And you just like, you have someone else that's up to date with what you want to do, and you just tell them. And you just feel like, it's just like, I honestly can't even explain why it works so well. But like, it feels like it means more when I actually have to explain myself to someone else. I'm like, you know what? It really would be valuable if I got this done now. Body doubling is kind of that on steroids, where you're physically like in the same room as someone else or on a video call. I do this like every day now with my friends. This one is just goated. I'm gonna make a whole video on that one. That's, by the way, for context, I had a lot of resistance to film this video, and I did it because of accountability with my friend and body doubling. He's literally in the same call with me right now. Next one. Making small lifestyle changes. This is something which I think it's easy to get this feeling of being stuck in, of like, I can't actually add new things to my life. You know, fitness, health, routines, you know, you do it for a few times and then the habit just never sticks. And it never comes close to becoming a habit. And it's just maximum willpower required every single time. And then as soon as you become distracted, as soon as something else comes up in life, it just goes. The brute force discipline doesn't really work. Only works as long as you keep paying attention. So the GOAT for lifestyle changes is going to be Atomic Habits. This is probably, I think it's the most common, most popular self-improvement book. It's just required reading. It's just so good. If you are not adding habits to your life constantly, like, you have to be. Like, they're so powerful. You can just, I've been going to the gym, by the way, for like 2 years regularly. Would not have done this without habits. And it's on autopilot. It's so easy. I literally don't have to worry about it. It just happens. Good. And now here's a tough one. Binging and distractions, particularly technology ones. You know, that kind of cheap dopamine feeling, phones and socials. And for me, I get this so bad. This is really bad for me. YouTube in particular. I swear, I must have the lowest self-control of any human being on the planet. And I think that the view of our culture is really behind. I think the technology is just exploded so quickly that we have not responded to it fast enough. And I think we're all making a huge mistake. Most people really think that like this is a personal failure. If I have a bad day and I binge something, I should be going to sleep, and instead I'm on Instagram. Oh, I should have just used my willpower. I just had a moment of weakness. I need to try harder. This is a point that I really want to make strongly. The technology industry is like so rich, and they have engineers and psychologists working so hard to steal your attention. And surprise, they're good at it. There's so many ways in which you can push your own buttons as a human being. For me, I've given up on this. I really can't be bothered. I actually think it's a bit of an ego thing. If you are constantly telling yourself, oh, I'm strong enough to resist the temptations. Maybe I just failed once, it was a bad day, but I'll do it next time. I think get serious. Look at your history. How often do you binge? How often do you distract yourself when things are tough, when there's anxiety, when you have a bit of avoidance? Look at the history, and if it shows that you've failed a lot, then maybe you're just gonna keep failing. Maybe you're trying to do something that's too hard. My solution is blocking tours. It makes life so easy. Right now, I have zero temptation to waste time on YouTube because I physically can't. It's so good. I also mentioned Digital Minimalism here. It's a pretty nice book. It doesn't go into too much detail with like the physical blocking, but it's a very good one. Cal Newport's great. I like this guy. I would recommend that. The book's really good for like kind of reframing your relationship with tech. Being mentally tired, people trying to maintain the focus for too long, it's just kind of like fighting against biology, I think. What I use is Pomodoro, which is a systematized break system. So I have a timer going, which is like every 30 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and the alarm goes off and it pings, okay, 5-minute break, start the timer. And it doesn't take too much time, and suddenly you're able to go throughout the whole day. Like, your stamina mentally is just so much stronger, just because you took a break. Super powerful. I am literally using Pomodoros like constantly throughout my life now. I'm like always on Pomodoro. It's just good to take breaks all the time. And then information overload. I think this is probably true for everyone now. There's just too much information in the world. And can you try to remember everything? I'm going to tell you that you probably can't. Particularly if you're in school and you're like researching and you actually have to write things about your knowledge. It is very hard to do that off the cuff. A lot of note-taking systems out there. I like Notion and Obsidian's pretty good. And again, the GOAT, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. This is like a mantra you need to repeat to yourself. Small recurring chores. I find the small chores so annoying. This is like a big one for me in life. I hate small chores. I've systematized all of them, but the willpower solution, what I used to do is basically you just forget about it until it comes to your attention, and it usually comes to your attention when it's really bad. So you're signing up for like always being behind on everything. It's never actually fully clean. It's never actually maintained. I like recurring task lists. I use GTD for that. And I also like cornerstone habits and routines. That's things like the morning, evening, and weekly routine that I mentioned before. I can attach my cleaning to the weekly routine, and then it happens automatically every week. So that's my intro list. I think these are probably the most important things for what I would recommend to like a student in the modern day. If you apply all these, you'll probably be pretty on top of things. But there's many others. So making your own systems. If you are reading those willpower solutions, the common trend is emotional exhaustion. It's really like, this is something which you notice having been through a long time, is that it's not just thinking too much, it leads very quickly into just emotional effort constantly that you have to put into things. And just regular work requires emotional effort. It shouldn't be that way. And comparison with system solutions, just mechanical reliability. This is the reason why I'm filming this first. This is the very first video that I'm adding to this channel. I want to make videos about literally all these systems. So every single one of these, I will basically give a how-to guide of like, if you've never done it before, this is how to use it as a system. From the start all the way up to scaling up how much you want. I think that it's gonna be fun. If you're like interested in any of these things, you can subscribe and we will cover in the future, but it'll probably take me a while to make them all. So in the meantime, just look them up on YouTube. There's probably tons of videos out there for them. But yes, you can apply systems to basically anything if you're creative enough. Anyway, I won't go into this. There's a lot of things you could do. I could talk a little bit about how my life has been going, but I think the video's gone on long enough that I would like to finish it. I'll save it for another day. Here are the conclusions. I recommend that you audit your life. Basically, you go through everything in your life and you ask yourself this question, right? What is harder than it should be? What are these situations where I'm in system 1 and I'm switching to system 2 and using willpower and have to motivate myself and just thinking and I can't switch back to autopilot? What are these areas of life that are actually causing us stress? They're causing us to burn out? And rank them. Just to get them, out on the page and be like, eventually I'm going to have a system that solves this problem. You won't be able to do all of them at once, but you need to choose like which is the first one. If it's, I don't have a calendar, I don't use a calendar. it should probably be a calendar. I don't know. Maybe you're interested in the GTD task lists. That's a huge rabbit hole. And then if you want to try and apply one of the systems that I've listed, go through this list and whichever one grabs your fancy, look into it more. Watch some YouTube on it. They're all pretty straightforward. They solve that problem. So I think you'll know which one of them is the biggest roadblock for you right now. As for our channel, that's kind of the crux of our channel. I think it's very cool to have this kind of holistic view of your life and how to move forward in life. That's going to be our channel. Hopefully we can be able to put some videos out faster than this one. I'll just leave it with this. If you want to have us make a video on something particular, you can just comment, because we are a new channel, so we will very easily be able to accommodate. We'll do whatever you guys ask for. If you're the kind of person that I was, who needs these kind of systems, it's life-changing. It's just, I really thought that stress was something that was just going to be a requirement for life, and it's just going to be there forever. You needed to be stressed in order to do work, right? Over relying on willpower. Stress, I've been researching psychology. Stress is like optional in life. It's completely optional. You don't actually have to do it. You can so simply create a life that doesn't have stress. Anyway, I won't get into that, but it's possible. I really want to get that across, that it's actually possible to just not be putting in too much effort to everything in life. So with that said, thank you for watching. And I would highly recommend you actually take some of these steps. The very first step to making changes is to actually take action. So I don't know how good you are at putting into action things at this point in your life, but the first thing you should do is an audit. Figure out what that number one thing is you need to do, and figure out what that number one system to start with is. Good luck.